India has done something pretty huge. For the first time in over 150 years, it's completely overhauled its criminal laws. The old Indian Penal Code? Gone. In its place, we have the brand new Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita, or BNS for short. So, what does this new rulebook actually mean for everyday life? Well, let's dive in and break it all down.
Look, this isn't just some minor update with a few new clauses. This new code is trying to fundamentally change the relationship between the government and the people. So we're going to tackle this by looking at three huge areas. First, the new rules for protests and what can happen in public spaces. Second, how the law holds police and other officials accountable. And finally, what new duties and responsibilities now fall on you, the citizen.
All right, first up, public peace. The BNS gets really specific about that moment when a group of people gathering together actually crosses a legal line. And the whole idea is built around this one key concept, the unlawful assembly.
So what exactly makes a gathering unlawful? Well, according to this new code, the magic number is 5. If you have 5 or more people, and they all share an illegal goal, what the law calls a common object, then boom, you've got an unlawful assembly. But that just leads to the next question, right? What counts as an illegal common object?
Okay, so the BNS lays out these 5 specific red flags. Basically, if your group's main purpose is to intimidate the government, stop the law from being carried out, commit some other crime, or use force to take property or make someone do something they're not supposed to, well, that assembly is now breaking the law. It's a pretty wide net, as you can see.
Now here's where the law gets really fascinating and a little bit tricky. It draws a line between a common object and a common intention. Think of it like this. A common object could be when a protest gets heated and people spontaneously decide to block a road. There wasn't a pre-existing plan. Common intention, on the other hand, is when, say, 2 people plan a robbery together beforehand. That distinction is absolutely critical because it completely changes how guilt is assigned to every single person in the group.
So what happens when things escalate? The second anyone in that unlawful assembly uses force or violence to achieve their goal, the charge changes. The whole thing becomes a riot. And here's the kicker. Every single person in that assembly can then be held responsible for rioting, even if they weren't the one who was violent.
And we're talking about serious consequences here. If there are deadly weapons involved, the punishment can go all the way up to 5 years in prison. The law is sending a very clear message. Public disorder, especially when armed, will not be taken lightly.
All right, let's switch gears to something much simpler, an affray. You can basically just think of this as a public brawl. If 2 or more people start fighting out in public and it disturbs the peace, that's an affray. The 2 key things the law looks for are public place and disruption of the peace. Simple as that.
But you know, this new rulebook is not a one-way street. Not at all. A really significant part of the BNS is actually about holding people in power accountable. So let's take a look at the new rules that apply to public officials.
This right here gets to the absolute heart of official accountability. It's targeting any public servant who knows they're breaking the law and does it anyway, specifically to hurt someone. In plain English, it's a tool designed to punish the abuse of power. And the code gets really specific about what public servants are forbidden from doing. They can't use their powerful positions for personal financial gain, like getting into trades they're not supposed to, or buying property they have influence over. There are also strict rules about creating false documents, and, this is a big one, a new legal duty for hospitals to give immediate medical help to victims of certain crimes.
Now this is a really interesting twist. The BNS brings in community service as a new form of punishment. For some of these offenses, like a public servant illegally trading, a judge can now sentence them to do community service instead of, or in addition to, other penalties. It's a totally new way of thinking about justice in this context.
Okay, so we've covered public order and we've talked about holding officials accountable. Let's turn to the third piece of this whole puzzle, the duties of the citizen. What does the BNS actually expect from you?
So the BNS is pretty clear. Citizens have a duty to cooperate with the legal process. You can't just run off to avoid a summons or physically stop an official from serving you a notice. And if you're legally required to answer questions from an official or sign a statement, you have to do it. Just not cooperating is no longer really an option.
And yeah, that non-cooperation comes with some real teeth. If you intentionally resist a lawful arrest, whether it's your own arrest or someone else's, you could be looking at up to 6 months in prison. The message here is crystal clear. Obstructing justice is a serious offense in and of itself.
All right, now we've got to talk about what is probably one of the most debated and frankly nuanced parts of this entire new code, the idea of making an attempt on your own life a crime. But as you're about to see, the law is incredibly specific about when this actually applies.
This is such a critical point to understand. The BNS does not make all suicide attempts a crime. Let me say that again. It's not a blanket rule. This new law is aimed at one very specific situation: when a person attempts suicide as a tactic, as leverage, to force a public official to do something or to stop them from doing their job. It's the act of coercion the law is targeting, not the attempt itself.
So after going through all these different areas, public spaces, official duties, citizen responsibilities, what's the big picture here? What's the final takeaway from this massive new legal framework?
When you step back and look at the BNS as a whole, you can almost see it as a new kind of social contract. Think of it like a three-legged stool. One leg is maintaining public order. The second is holding officials accountable for their actions. And the third is defining the duties of every citizen. The ultimate goal seems to be creating a new, maybe better, balance between these three crucial things.
And that, right there, brings us to the fundamental challenge, the billion-person question, doesn't it? It's one thing to write a new rule book. It's a completely different and monumental task to apply it fairly across a country of over 1.4 billion people. The real test of the BNS won't be in the text of the law, but in whether it can actually deliver a more just and fair society for every single Indian. And that's a question only time can answer.